long before her crown ever touched gold, long before her name was whispered in the halls of the king. There was a girl, an orphan, a nobody, whose destiny was hidden in the folds of her pain. Her name was Esther. She didn't come from a royal line. She didn't grow up in luxury or power. She was raised in the shadows, under the care of her cousin Mordecai in a land not her own. Esther was a Jewish exile living in Persia, a stranger among strangers, belonging nowhere but chosen for something greater. She didn't know it yet, but her story was about to shake kingdoms and rewrite history. The Empire of Persia stretched across 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, ruled by King Xerxes, a man of great wealth and pride. He had everything: armies, gold, glory, yet even kings fall to the traps of their own pride. During one of his grand feasts, he called for Queen Vashti, his wife, to come and display her beauty before his nobles. But Vashti refused, and that single act of defiance opened a door not just for the king's anger, but for Esther's destiny. The king's advisors urged him to remove Vashti and choose a new queen, one who would obey, one who would honor him before all. So a royal decree went out: let beautiful young women be gathered from every province of the kingdom for the king. It was a beauty contest for the crown. But behind the glamour, behind the perfumes and jewels, God was orchestrating a divine setup. Esther was chosen to be among the young women brought to the palace. Imagine that moment. A humble orphan girl walking through golden gates, unsure of what awaited her. She didn't fight her way in. She didn't chase power or fame, but favor followed her, silently like the wind that carries the scent of destiny. And Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. Esther 2:15. She listened more than she spoke. She moved with grace clothed in humility, and while others relied on beauty, Esther carried something deeper: purpose. For months, the women were prepared 12 months of beauty treatments and lessons in etiquette. But Esther didn't let the palace change her. She remembered who she was: a daughter of God, a vessel of promise. When her turn came to stand before the king, she asked for nothing except what was advised. And the moment the king saw her, something divine stirred in his spirit. He saw not just a woman, but a queen. And just like that, the crown that once belonged to Vashti rested upon Esther's head. An orphan became a queen. A forgotten girl became the face of an empire. But this was not just about beauty or chance. This was about divine positioning. God had placed Esther in the palace for a purpose she could not yet see. Because while she was rising, darkness was also moving. A man named Haman, powerful and proud, rose to become the king's chief official, and in his arrogance he demanded that everyone bow before him. But Mordecai, Esther's cousin, refused to bow. He bowed only to God. Haman's pride turned to rage. He didn't just want to punish Mordecai, he wanted to destroy all the Jews in the kingdom. He went before the king and twisted the truth, saying, "There is a certain people scattered throughout your provinces, whose laws are different from yours. It is not in your best interest to let them live." The king, blinded by trust, handed Haman his signet ring, a symbol of royal power. And Haman sent out letters across the empire to destroy every Jew, men, women, and children on a single day. While the people wept in the streets, Esther was in the palace, surrounded by comfort yet cut off from the cries outside. She didn't know what was happening until Mordecai sent her a message that would test her courage, her faith, and her destiny. He said, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house you alone will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But who knows if you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Those words hit Esther like thunder. For such a time as this. She realized her crown was not for comfort, it was for calling. She was not in the palace by accident, she was there by assignment. But fear whispered to her heart. To go before the king without being summoned was a death sentence even for a queen. One wrong step, one wrong word, and her story could end. Yet something inside her, something divine, refused to let fear win. Esther's faith rose above her fear. She told Mordecai, "Go gather all the Jews and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days. My maids and I will do the same. Then I will go to the king, and if I perish, I perish." In that moment, a timid orphan became a courageous warrior. She traded fear for faith. She traded comfort for calling, and she stepped into the fire of destiny. 3 days had passed. 3 days of silence, fasting, and tears. The streets of Susa were filled with whispers the decree of death had spread, and fear lay heavy over every home. But somewhere within the palace walls, Esther stood before her mirror not as a queen wrapped in gold, but as a daughter clothed in faith. Her heart pounded like thunder. Every breath felt like a countdown to destiny. She whispered a prayer not with trembling lips but with a steady heart. Lord, I don't have the strength, but you do. I don't have the power, but you are my strength. Use me, even if it costs me everything. And with that she rose. She put on her royal robes not for vanity but for victory. She walked down the long corridor, leading to the throne room, every step echoing like a drumbeat of faith. No one dared to speak. Servants watched in silence, hearts frozen in awe. The queen was walking where no one dared to walk. Uninvited before the king. In Persia, to approach the throne without being called was a crime punishable by death. Even queens were not exempt. Only if the king extended his golden scepter could one live. Esther knew that. But she also knew something greater. When God calls you to stand, no law can stop his will. As she entered, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The king looked up. His eyes met hers. For a moment, the world stood still. Would he raise his scepter? Or his sword? The air was thick with suspense. And then the king lifted the golden scepter toward her. Life flooded her body. Grace had gone before her. What is it, Queen Esther? The king said. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it shall be given to you. But Esther didn't rush. She was wise. She knew timing was everything. She simply bowed and said, If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for you. The king smiled and intrigued. He agreed, and so did Haman. That day, the queen hosted the two most powerful men in the kingdom. She moved with calmness, grace, and discernment. But behind her gentle eyes burned a fire, a plan that would expose evil and save her people. At the banquet, the king asked again, What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. Still she didn't reveal it. She said softly, If it pleases the king, come again tomorrow for another banquet. Then I will answer the king's question. It wasn't hesitation, it was divine strategy. God was aligning events in the background. That same night, while the palace slept, the king couldn't. He tossed and turned. Something in his spirit was unsettled. He ordered the royal records to be read to him, and in those scrolls, he discovered something he had long forgotten. Mordecai, the Jew who once saved his life, had never been honored. Just as the king was remembering, Haman was outside planning Mordecai's death. He had built a giant gallows to hang him in the morning, but heaven had other plans. The king called Haman in and asked, What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Pride blinded Haman. He thought the king was speaking about him. So he said, Let him be dressed in royal robes the king has worn, and let him ride the king's horse through the city, proclaimed by a noble official. The king smiled and said, Excellent, go at once. Do all this for Mordecai the Jew. Haman's face fell. The one he wanted to kill, he was now commanded to honor. God was already turning the tables. As the next day dawned, Haman's pride crumbled. He returned home humiliated, his plans unraveling before his eyes. And that evening the second banquet began. Esther sat across from the king and Haman. Her voice was calm, but her heart was fierce. The moment had come. The king asked again, What is your petition, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it shall be granted. Esther took a deep breath. The room was silent, and then she spoke. If I have found favor in your sight, O king, spare my life and the lives of my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. The king's face changed. Who would dare do such a thing? He thundered. And Esther turned, her eyes steady, her voice like a sword of truth. The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman. The room erupted in shock. Haman's color drained. He fell to his knees, trembling. The king, in fury, stormed out into the garden. Haman, desperate, threw himself at Esther's feet, begging for his life, but when the king returned and saw him near her couch, his anger blazed hotter. Will he even assault the queen while I am in the house? The king roared. Before Haman could speak, the guards covered his face, a sign that his fate was sealed. And one of the eunuchs said, There is a gallows standing by Haman's house, the one he prepared for Mordecai. The king's voice thundered, Hang him on it. And just like that, the enemy fell into the trap he had set. The gallows he built for another became the altar of his own downfall. When God fights for you, No weapon formed against you can stand. The proud fall by their own schemes, and the humble rise by God's grace. Esther had not only saved her life, she had set in motion a miracle that would rescue her entire people. But the story wasn't over yet. The decree of death was still active. The law of the Medes and Persians could not be revoked. Even though Haman was gone, his order remained written. Now Esther had to fight for something greater, not just exposure of evil, but redemption for her people. She had won the battle, but the war for deliverance had just begun. The palace was silent. The hall still echoed with the memory of Haman's downfall, but Esther could not rest. Yes, the enemy had been exposed, but the shadow of his decree still hung over the people of God. A letter had gone out sealed by the king's own ring, commanding death to every Jew in the land, and no law of Persia could be undone, not even by the king himself. The very weapon that was meant to destroy them was still active. Time was running out. The day of destruction was drawing near. Esther knew her people were still in danger. So once again she put on her royal robe, not for beauty but for battle. She stood where few dared to stand, but before the king one more time uninvited. The guards looked uneasy. The law hadn't changed. But the king, seeing her again, extended the golden scepter. "What is it, Queen Esther?" he said softly. "What is your petition? It shall be granted to you." Esther bowed and said, "If it pleases the king, let an order be written to overrule the letters devised by Haman, the letters that command the destruction of my people. For how can I bear to see the calamity that will come upon them?" The king looked at her with compassion, and power met purpose. He said, "I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he has been hanged on the gallows he built. Now write another decree in the king's name on behalf of the Jews, as you see fit, and seal it with the king's ring." Right there, in that sacred moment, the tide began to turn. The same authority that once signed death was now used to sign deliverance. Mordecai was summoned, once a servant, now a ruler. The king gave him the very signet ring that had belonged to Haman. It was the symbol of divine reversal, the transfer of power from evil to good. And Mordecai wrote the new decree, a message of hope that spread across the empire like light breaking through night. The Jews may now defend themselves against any who attack them. They are permitted to stand, to fight, and to live. Riders mounted swift horses, royal messengers carrying salvation instead of death. They rode through towns, across deserts and mountains, spreading the good news. What once was a decree of fear became a declaration of freedom. And when the people heard it, a shout of joy rose through the land. They wept, they laughed, they worshipped. Because God had done what no man could, he turned mourning into dancing. In the palace, Mordecai stepped out dressed in royal robes, blue, white, and gold, and a great crown upon his head. The same man who once sat in sackcloth at the gate now walked in glory. The people of Susa cheered. The Jews rejoiced. The sound of celebration filled every home. And across every province, from Persia to Ethiopia, the enemies who once mocked them now trembled, because the God of Israel had turned the story around. Soft prophetic tone. There is something divine about that turning point. The same ring that sealed your pain can become the key to your promotion. The same people who doubted you will watch God exalt you. And the same season that broke you can become the very stage where grace crowns you. Because when God reverses your story, no decree, no curse, no enemy can undo it. Esther's courage opened a door, but God's hand wrote the miracle. As the day of the attack approached, the Jews prepared themselves. They didn't hide. They didn't run. They stood firm, with courage and unity, knowing heaven fought beside them. When their enemies rose against them, the tables turned. The Jews defeated every force sent to destroy them. Fear fell upon their enemies, and no one could withstand them. Even the governors and officials helped them, because the dread of Mordecai had spread throughout the empire. What was meant for their destruction became the day of their deliverance. And the name of the Lord was glorified in every province. Then came the day of joy, the celebration of Purim. A day not just to remember what God had done, but to declare, the God who saves once, saves forever. The God who reverses destiny still reigns. Esther and Mordecai decreed that this day be remembered for generations. A reminder that when the people of God fast, pray, and stand in faith, heaven moves. Softer emotional tone. Esther's story was not just about royalty. It was about responsibility. It was about the courage to stand when silence is easier, the faith to believe when fear screams louder, the strength to speak when every voice tells you to stay quiet. And through one woman's obedience, an entire nation was saved. Her story still echoes in the hearts of believers today, because many of us, like Esther, find ourselves in moments of divine testing. We are placed in positions we didn't ask for, facing pressures we didn't choose. But purpose often comes dressed as pain. Favor often hides behind fear. God still raises His Esther's men and women who will rise in faith when the world trembles in fear. People who will say, "If I perish, I perish, but I will not stay silent." Pause, softer voice. So wherever you are right now, in the palace or the pit, in the spotlight or in silence, remember this. God sees you. He hasn't forgotten you. You may not understand the process, but He is preparing your purpose. You may not see the crown yet, but it's already written in heaven. Because like Esther, you were born for such a time as this. The battle was over. The cries of fear had turned into songs of joy. What once was a day of doom became a day of dancing. In homes across Persia, families gathered. They laughed again. They worshipped again. They believed again. Because the God who seemed silent had spoken through action, not in thunder or fire, but through the quiet courage of a woman who dared to say yes. Esther, the orphan, the exile, the hidden girl no one noticed, had become the queen God used to save a nation. And Mordecai, the man who once sat in ashes, now stood in royal robes, second in command to the king. The same people who mourned in sackcloth were now clothed in joy. This was more than a victory. It was a divine reversal. When the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dream. Psalm 126:1. The Jews had seen death approaching, but God turned it into deliverance. They were marked for destruction, but heaven marked them for destiny. Softer tone. Esther's story didn't end in the palace. It lived on in the hearts of her people. Year after year they celebrated Purim, the festival of remembrance, a day to tell their children and their children's children. We were almost destroyed, but God stepped in. Every time they gathered, they remembered that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to trust God in the middle of it. Every time they feasted, they remembered that no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes for those who stand in faith. Esther's name means star, and that's exactly what she became, a light in a kingdom filled with darkness. She didn't fight with weapons. She fought with prayer. She didn't shout with power. She spoke with wisdom. She didn't stand by strength. She stood by grace. And that's what made her shine. Soft prophetic voice. Beloved, her story is not just history. It's a mirror of what God still does today. Maybe you feel small. Maybe you feel forgotten. Maybe you've been waiting for a sign that your pain has purpose. This is your reminder. God can lift you from obscurity to opportunity. He can use your quiet obedience to shake nations. You don't have to come from a royal line, and you just have to say yes. Because when you yield to God, your life becomes a crown He wears to show His glory. Just like Esther, you are chosen. Not by chance, not by men, but by divine design. You were not born in this generation by accident. You were born for such a time as this. Maybe your palace is your workplace. Maybe your mission field is your home. Maybe your Haman is that fear, that doubt, that voice telling you you're not enough. But hear this. The same God who gave Esther boldness will give you courage. The same God who gave her favor will open doors for you. And the same God who turned her pain into purpose will turn yours into praise. When you walk through seasons of silence, don't lose heart. When you face rejection, don't quit. When life feels uncertain, don't fear. Because even when you can't see Him, God is still moving behind the scenes. He's writing your story with the same invisible ink He used for Esther. And just when it looks like the enemy has won, heaven will turn the page. Maybe right now you're like Esther before the throne, afraid but willing. Maybe you're like Mordecai at the gate, waiting and praying. Or maybe you're like the people of Israel, desperate for a miracle. Whatever your role, know this. God's plan for your life is bigger than your fear, stronger than your enemies, and more beautiful than you imagine. When you surrender your story to Him, He makes it royal. And so Esther's legacy lives on, and not just in Scripture, but in every believer who dares to stand in faith. Her courage became a call for generations. Her obedience became a doorway for miracles. Her faith became a blueprint for victory. The crown she wore may have faded with time, but the glory she carried still shines today in every life that says, "I will not be silent. I will rise in faith. I was born for such a time as this." And as you listen right now, maybe God is whispering the same thing to your heart. I have chosen you. I have placed you where you are for a reason. And though you cannot see it, my favor surrounds you. Stand, speak, shine, for you are my Esther. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that God is still writing beautiful endings from broken beginnings, then take a moment now. Like this video to spread light. Comment below, I am chosen for such a time as this. Share this with someone who needs courage today. And subscribe to Down on My Knees for more powerful, faith-filled stories that will lift your spirit and strengthen your walk with God. Because your story is still being written, and like Esther, you were born to shine.